Okay, so yes, good evening, welcome all. So yeah, last time we were basically discussing the relationship between the knowledge area, and we try to understand how all these knowledge area work in unison to basically give us actual disciplined best practices within the business analysis policies and processes. Now, in every organizations, there's a bit of customization, or there's a bit of change as they apply to their own, policies, processes, understanding. So wherever we are going to join, we normally follow the processes adopted by them, and that's how we keep learning, we keep evolving, and that's a kind of what we can say nth level customization we can do for a given organization. Sometimes we might use templates which are standard available on a websites like Microsoft, Agile Alliance, IEEE, whatnot. Sometimes we might tweak those templates to our needs. Okay. Now from today onwards, we're going to learn, understand how do you collect requirements, because overall, when you look at this knowledge area, the collection of requirement is the crux, is the basically what we can say a basic intention of actual business analysis. So you analyze business, you convert the vision thought process into requirement list, then you get it sanctioned, approved with the business priority and scenario applied to that. We normally create a document called SRS. Even that SRS can be called as BRD, FRD, and there are a number of ways we normally discuss this SRS, or we collect these requirements with a bit of additional details, something like high level diagram, something like decision analysis processes, something like uh, business analyst tools, which are like uh, fishbone diagram, mind maps, and there are a number of other tools which you're going to also learn and do a kind of hands-on, so that we understand as a business analyst how I can excel in a given job, right? So let's get started. First, we'll try to understand, as far as BA book goes, how they look at these processes. Okay, so business analyst core concept model is basically a model they have devised in the recent past, where they have tried to define this process in a sequential manner, because whenever you look at these knowledge area, there are a good number of overlaps we are looking at it, right? So how do you basically execute this in terms of a model, this in terms of practical implementation, right? So let's try to understand this, and then we'll basically dwell more into how do we collect requirement, how do you classify requirement, how do you understand if there is a complex requirement, how do you represent in terms of various graphical models like use case diagram and others, right? So let's start with BACCM. This is what they refer to, business analysis core concept model. So it's a conceptual model, defines a conceptual framework for the business analysis profession. This is mentioned in the babu. Key terms, we provides definition for essential concept which are highlighted as their importance to the babu guide. Requirement classification schema. Now, whenever you collect these requirements, we normally do a bit of additional classification in terms of how they can be executed, how they can be sequentialized, how they have been approved by the client for a given number of days to be completed and something like that, right? Because what drives business, the client is sharing the requirements with you with all its background, all its requirement to their business, and so we understand, we categorize or classify this business needs or the requirement based on client perceptions, client background, client business need. Okay, so here the requirement classification schema identifies the level of types of requirements that assist the business analyst and other stakeholder in categorizing these requirements. So all business analysts, we closely work with stakeholder, we closely work with client entities, so that we can classify these requirement, we can group these requirement, and they can then we can look at how we can step by step evolve these requirements, right? Now stakeholders, here as we normally build a list of stakeholders, we normally try to understand their roles in the whole project, in the whole analysis process to start with, and then characteristics of a group or individual participating or affected by the business analyst activities within a change. So who's going to get the maximum impact of change, right? So whatever gap study we have done, we normally mention a specific user who will have the maximum impact in their day-to-day work, and that's how we normally define the roles. We normally define the characteristics of the groups of stakeholders as well, or individual participating in or affected by the business analysis activities within a proposed change, right? And then we have requirements and design. Describe the distinction between the importance of requirement and design as they relate to business analysis. Now, this is one of the most crucial factor here. When you say requirement and design, requirements are basically a list of requirements. What we need to do in terms of achieving that business goal, which we have mentioned before the analysis, right? So, like in our case, enhancing attendance management solution. Now, here the HR persons are the most prone for adopting to this change, because they are basically changing the way they notify the attendance. They normally get this attendance recorded without any manual effort and so on and so forth. So here we need to understand from the HR manager's perspective how they're going to adopt this new requirement, and what are designs consideration we need to include in our documentation. And these design consideration are kind of different from requirement. So design consideration, like as we discussed the exception, in some really colder area we couldn't use biometric. It's not feasible. By the other industry experience, by the other industries experience, or somebody of HR at a given region can guide you on that. See, most of the time as an analyst, we don't reinvent the wheel, but we try to gather these things from the users, from the stakeholder, or the guys who are maximum affected by this system. And that way, what we do, we discuss with these guys, with the background, with their wish list, with their understanding of how they want to enhance their requirement. Does that make sense to you? Are we good? Could you understand these terminologies here? These
Yes,
are
sir.
again a kind of wrapper to the knowledge area. We are trying to strengthen it, we are trying to streamline it as per the implementation phase, and trying to fill in the gaps. And this is the kind of evolution we talk about whenever we work with the matured organizations, like IIBA, like PMPPMI, like IEEE, Carnegie Mellon, and there are a number of such organizations who are normally referred as a reference point. So here we are talking about the BABU or the IIBA, International Organizations for Business Analysis Processes, right? So here they keep updating, they keep enhancing these knowledge area for year on year, months on months, so that whenever they normally have these different what you can say discussion group or workshops, or basically they normally have once in a year kind of meet and greet where they discuss all these challenges on case to case basis. They normally even invent good number of such improvement implemented throughout the globe, and they can basically speak firsthand on their experiences, how they have tweaked or customized the process, and how they have gone to the nth level to make sure their project is a success, rather than going with the whatever available, which is basically either perceived by others or mentioned in the book itself. So they kind of force IIBA to improve these policies and processes a step further. It's a gradual evolution. So that's what we discussed in during this meet and greet, during these various workshops, or these yearly meets arranged by IIBAs and so on and so forth. If you are a member of IIBA, or you don't have to pay anything for that. You can just go to IIBA and register yourself as a enthusiast, learner, student, whatever they call it, and you might be able to get an email on a weekly by week basis, where they will basically guide you if they are having some sort of a free seminar, free webinar, or a free meet and greet, where you can go and try to understand how these really diligent individuals have discussing the latest improvement within the business analysis policies and processes. Okay, same with PMI, same with the scaled agile as well. Okay, Here, requirements classification schema. I have included two slides here. These are like 3 4 months old, but yes, this will give you a clear idea how we can basically adapt to a schema. Schema is a pre-formatted pattern, pre-formatted structure. Okay, and here what we are trying to do, we are trying to understand how some of these new evolution inventions are going to help us, right? So let's go through this. Business requirement, these describe. So how do you classify the business schema? Now every time we don't go with these same names, you might tweak the names as well, or you might choose couple of them rather than all of them. Okay, so it depends on your organizational adoptions. Why I'm saying organizational, because we are not senior business analysts, right? To basically debate on why we shouldn't have functional requirement to be adopted by business analysts rather than the design and architect. Again, these are getting acceptance kind of scenario here. So these are not as standard as the sixth knowledge area we discussed earlier, but these are the new evolution or the new additions which we normally get within the business analysis community. Business requirement. So what are the business requirement means? This describes the high level needs of organization as a whole, such as business issue or opportunity and reason why a project has been undertaken. Here we are talking about the core need of starting a project, core need of how a new work initiation have been started. Stakeholder requirement. This describes the need of a stakeholder or a group of stakeholder, where they mention specifically like in case these can be some type of exception, like we discussed in scenario of Canadian northern region, we couldn't normally use the biometric, so we need to go with the iris scanner or something else, even if they couldn't suggest that. So we basically, as a technical partner, might zero down on some better alternative for them. Okay, so this way we normally understand the stakeholder wish list, the efforts they have put in basically creating a conceptual or a logical solution for a given needs. Okay, so these are kind of helpful for our progressive nature of our solution as well most of the time. Then we talk about solution requirement. These describe the features, functions, and characteristics of a product. Here we are talking about something like high level diagram, a conceptual diagram, where we try to give a bird's eye view of a solution within one image or within, let's say, 4 5 core requirements. These describe the features, functions, and characteristics of a product, service, solution, or a result that will meet the business and stakeholder requirement. Solution requirements are further grouped into functional and non-functional requirements. We talked about mostly functional and non-functional requirement directly rather than an uncharacterized version of a requirement. So normally you can call them list of requirement as a solution requirement, or a kind of filtered core requirement of a given solution can be called as a solution requirement. Depending upon your adopted organizational policies and procedure, we normally refer these as below. And then there are functional requirements. So functional requirement are basically behaviors of a product or service or result or features or functionality to be adopted by a given product, solution, support services, right? For example, include actions, processes, data, interaction, and the product should execute. Now let's take off our simple, biometric attendance or enhancing attendance management solution type scenario here. So here, for a generic users, for a generic office where there are no, very cold scenarios, we normally have decided to adopt a biometric solution. So in biometric solution, how do you record attendance? You put a predefined finger on the biometric scanner, and the scanner records your video and displays your name and time of your attendance. Why name of time? So that you can validate your attendance has been recorded at such and such time with such and such name as you are given to the system, as we are basically shared by the system at that time. So it's a kind of validations type of feature list, whatever we include in the functional requirement. In a normal scenario, 85% plus time, functional requirements are basically devised, clearly worded by the architects and designer of the world. But in some templates, they might ask you to basically devise some functional requirement, some core functional requirement, and mention it in a SRS as well. Depend on again how you adapt to this schema for a given project, for a given requirement gathering sessions. Then we have non-functional requirement. So non-functional requirement supplement the functional requirement and describe the environment, conditions or qualities required for the product to be effective. So here we are talking about functionalities in terms of performance, mostly how they were expecting. Like we were discussing, the attendance should be recorded within 20 seconds, and this might be a requirement given by a client. Now, to implement these things, you need to improve your solutions to such performance. So that's why this is called as a performance requirement. Now, and this is also referred as a non-functional requirement. Performance is basically a kind of umbrella factor for a given solution feature list, right? So these are normally referred as a non-functional requirement. The example given here are reliability, security, performance, safety, level of service, supportability, retention, purge, low maintainability, easy to use, and so on and so forth. So there are number of ways these non-functional requirements are normally mentioned within these requirements document. Transitions and readiness requirement. Now these are newly added where as we developing something called attendance management solution, right, or enhancing attendance management solution. Now how these are going to get adapted in terms of if you want to transition this requirement from a desktop laptop to mobile phone, palm top, blackberry, this berry, that berry, and these transition or readiness to adaptive to the given scenario, or what we normally call as a portability. These describe the temporary capabilities such as data conversion, training requirement needed to transition from current as is state to a desired future taste, and so on and so forth. The project requirements, these describe the actions, processes, or other conditions the project needs to meet. Example might include milestone date, contractual obligations, and constraint. In many of the projects nowadays, they have something called penalty clause. So if you couldn't deliver these number of functionality by Christmas, you'll be penalized, or number of
Sorry to interrupt,
financial challenges might be faced by you.
Hello?
Anybody have any questions?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
So I missed the last word, what you mentioned about some terminology. I sorry, I missed it.
No. Is it in a project requirement or a transition readiness requirement, madam?
Yes, sir.
No, in which category?
So you are like you said about the project requirement, and what was the last terminology you used?
I'll tell you. No problem, no problem. Now these are the project requirements which are basically implementation specific requirement. These describe actions, processes or other conditions the projects need to meet. For example, milestone date, contractual obligation and constraint. Now in today's world, we normally have something called penalty clauses. So what are the penalty clauses? These normally refer to something like contractual obligations are related to deliveries promised by you to the client or the client's business. Let's say a client or stakeholders wants to have the delivery of the solution before Christmas. So you need to deliver this solution, implement and at least start user acceptance testing before Christmas. At least couple of days in Christmas, that's expected. If you couldn't do it, there might have been mention of a specific date, like by midnight of 24th December or something like that. Now we need to respect that requirement, which can be also called as a transition requirement or a non-functional requirement, where we have to fulfill this requirement, otherwise we might get financially penalized in terms of we might lose 200k, 500k, a couple of $1 million from our payments just because we couldn't complete that delivery within time, which is a kind of requirement of a client. Okay, and that's how these project requirements are really important in terms of contractual obligations or a constraint. Does that answer your question, ma'am? Have you understood now?
Yes, sir.
No problem. Thank you. The quality requirements. Now, again, these can be overlapping requirements. Quality requirement like we just discussed, right? The attendance should be achieved within 20 seconds. And that's a kind of requirement coming from a client, which also falls in non-functional requirement category, project requirement category, as well as quality requirement category. These captures any condition or criteria need to validate the successful completion of a project, deliverable, or fulfillment of other project requirements. Example include test, certification, and validations. Now here we are talking about a requirement like we just discussed. The attendance of an individual should be completed within 20 seconds. And this is what the requirement included by client or a stakeholder within our requirement gathering session. Now this requirement can be classified as a quality requirement or a performance requirement or a project requirement also. The requirement other which we discussed, we need to deliver the project with the given functionality, number of functionalities as in the list to before Christmas, so before 24th December, and there they might mention a date like before 20th or a weekend before Christmas, or a day before Christmas, like before 12th midnight of 24. So they should have those solution deployed to their disposal, something like that. So these type of requirements can be also qualified as a quality of requirements. Again, these are not very crucial entities, but within interview they might ask these things. I have never came across an interview where they ask differentiate between project and quality requirement, because there are good number of overlaps here. But project requirements mostly refer to the milestone date. Quality requirement mostly refers to the test, certification, and validation type of requirements. Okay, so this way, as an analyst, we should be able to differentiate between these category of requirements. Again, these are the latest in evolutions. These are the latest adoption by the business community. You might not be able to explain. You might not be basically a right candidate to ask us questions if you have just started understanding the business analysis, policies as processes right now. But just keep in mind, or try to jot down some sort of notes by yourself how you can explain a transition and readiness requirement. Okay, there were interview questions like tell me about non-functional and functional requirement. So non-functional requirements are performance requirement, safety requirements. You should be able to tell that one. And functional requirement are the list of features, list of what you can say, actions, processes to be completed by the solution. And these are performance requirement as far as the non-functional requirement goes. Okay, and there are good number of videos available on the YouTube as well, whenever we try to understand the functional versus non-functional requirement as well. Okay, so if you want to study in depth, you might go to a YouTube and type there difference between functional and non-functional requirement, and you get good number of videos there as well. Okay, okay, anybody do have any questions in this requirement classification schema as of now? Any confusion I can address to?
No, sir.
We are good, right? No problem. Let's move ahead. Now, what are the behavior qualities or personal traits we need to have in terms of analytical thinking and a problem solving? These are the core competencies in terms of a business analysis. As a person, we should have these categories, these personal traits to make us a good business analyst. Starting with creative thinking. What we are doing, we are trying to convert somebody's vision, mission, policies to a requirement, to a feature list. Now these converting to requirement to a solution requires a creative thinking, decision making, choose the right alternative, and we're going to learn with different tools how to choose the right alternative as well. Then keep continuously learning, should be a fast learner, or basically trying to understand the situation from a learning perspective. Then problem solving, same as creative thinking here, we are trying to walk a step ahead in terms of giving a solution to the client or suggesting the best alternative available to the client with all those artifacts, all those evidence required to for such decision. Then we have systems thinking in terms of how this solution could be implemented with the help of automation, computer, the internet of things, and the whole 9 yards of it. So that's why we should be able to convert the thought process into an applicable system, and we should understand what we can include, what we can't include, and how we should go about it, how we should solve if that's the main problem, that's the crux of the solution. So we can't ignore it, and so on. So then we have conceptual thinking. Here we are building a conceptual solution in terms of devising a kind of best suggested solution to a given number of stakeholders, client, and the other partners of it in terms of trying to implement the technologically advanced solution for them. And that's why conceptual thinking is a must. And then visual thinking, this is added afterwards, where we should be able to understand or visualize how this solution, if implemented, will help to the client stakeholder, and we should be able to describe it to them as well, so that they'll feel okay, yeah, we are going in right direction, this is going to change our life. Okay. And if I may say, there are good number of marketing art where the people can market a solution which is a kind of future state with extreme flora and fauna, and that way also kind of kind of overdoing of visual thinking, and there are various functionality and feature lists which we couldn't implement. Let's not do that. Let's give a practical view of visual thinking, practical approach to a solution, and we'll basically do some hands-on experience where we'll understand what you mean by excessive visual thinking or excessive marketing a given product solution or something like that, right? So here, these are the few traits which are mentioned here, just to make sure you can validate all these traits. If you have any, if you haven't or you're lacking in something, you might want to resharpen those skills, because these are really important as far as the business analysis, policy processes, or the overall business analysis execution on the ground. Okay. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, sir.
Again, there are lots and lots of discussion we can go on each and every skill here, but just to mention as an one to one, what all it takes to be a business analyst. So these are the 6 7 skills which are kind of core competency models as far as the business analyst goes. Okay, let me take you further, and let's start about the tools and techniques as of now. Okay, now first we'll basically try to understand the requirement gathering techniques here. Now, what are the requirement gathering techniques? The way we gather requirements. So what are different type of discussions, meetings we might need to arrange, we might need to go through to gather requirements. First is brainstorming. Now, brainstorming is something like you sit together in a group and you try to understand what all type of puzzles for various solution I can suggest to a given problem. And this is we normally do whenever we meet and greet with our family member, with our near and dear ones, where if anybody have any problem, everybody else jump in and try to give solution as per his thought process, his experience, his education, and other backgrounds. So here brainstorming is to identify possible solution to problems and clarify details of opportunity. This is a kind of formal label to a process where in a group you discuss certain solution or you conceptualize certain solutions. Okay, as simple as that. Now these are also referred as joint discussion session, JDS or JAD, joint joint session overall, I believe. Okay, and then we have document analysis, where creating the gap analysis, creating as is processes and to be processes, and trying to understand the gap or scoping of migration project, where we normally jot down the requirements, like I need to go to from point A to point B. So what are the things I need to achieve, and this is what we can call a gap analysis sort of process. Then we have a focus group or a SME. What is focus group? There are some individuals within your group who have a better knowledge of certain thing. Let's talk about I need to fly from US to India. I'm not a travel agent. So in our group, in our friends and circle, we might have somebody who might have worked as a travel agent or who is working as a travel agent. So I might call him or her saying, hey, I believe you had worked in this ticketing or traveling system, right? Could you suggest me the best time or the most economical flight I can get from traveling from let's say St. Louis to Mumbai? And he might suggest, yes, I believe this airline have had some sale couple of weeks back, and he might come back to you saying, okay, let me check and come back to you. He might come back to you within a day or two. This is like you are leveraging and subject matter expert SME. Or there could be a focus group. You might go to a group, might be evening, daytime, weekend or something, and there you might check with the group overall saying, hey group, I want to travel from St. Louis to Mumbai urgently. Could you suggest any agent or any the most economical way? And there might be a couple of suggestions. You might choose one of them. So focus group and SMEs are representative of the users or a customer or of a product to get feedback, to validate and refine already elicited requirement. What do you mean by elicited requirement? These are almost a requirement at a implementation level rather than the early thought process level. So you know what you want. Now you just need to adapt to some execution of it. Like we discussed, airline tickets. You need to just pay and get airline tickets, and you need to understand which is economical, because various different airlines have sales at different time. They might basically give you some cashback or some other features like upgradation from economy to business class and so on and so forth, or some larger luggages can be shipped and so on and so forth. So this way we might understand or learn how to get things done more efficiently, effectively. Then there are some interface analysis. These are specifically user-centric approach. So here we define or design more wireframe web pages first and then discuss. So there are a proactive studies gone in and then we discuss together. In brainstorming, we start discussing the ideas. Here, that's a kind of proactive, where interface design analysis kind of reactive. Choose from the one. Then there are interview session. We already talked about that, but let's revise it. You can go to a stakeholder saying, hey, Ravindra, I believe you stated this requirement of, adapting to iris scanner for some colder region. Could we discuss it more? So you say, yeah, please sit down. And Ravindra might come back to you saying, okay, I've been, reading various reviews on the internet, and there I came across a review where they say biometric couldn't work effectively in colder regions. And as you know, we have some good number of offices in Canadian colder region. So what we want to do, we want to replace this biometric with some effective tools, right? So how do you do it? What do you suggest? Or he or she can also suggest you might go with iris scanner. You might have something like a photo taken with a timestamp or something like that, where we could be able to clearly identify the person entering to the office, and this way you might find a good alternative in terms of notifying the attendance. Okay, and again, within the interview might ask question, even the other party might ask question. It looks like a discussion most of the time, but you might categorize is as an interview because you have requested the meeting and you're trying to gather details or a background of specific requirements. Okay, now these are like kind of you go meet and greet. Nowadays you might have a Google Meet or a Zoom Meet as well. Then there another technique which is really good old techniques, which is called observation. In terms of observation, you visit the actual place where the problem does exist, analyze the problem to the nth level, and try to collect how the solution can be shaped up for that problem, which gives you a more insightful ideas, because you as a person, you as an artist has a first hand experience of that problem, right? BA build requirements by passive observation. What does this mean? Me, Ravindra, as a BA, goes to a state farm office where they are recording the manual attendance and try to understand how the process is at fault, how the process is challenging, how we are basically trying to tackle the n number of challenges they are tackling right now so that we can create the best possible solution available for them. Okay, so these are the first six techniques of requirement gathering. Let's have a look at few others. There are surveys and questionnaires. These are specifically for the remote users. So if you have your users staying in a remote part of Canada, India, Asia, or remote countries, you normally choose these type of requirement gathering techniques. So survey or questionnaire can be released on as a web page, and you normally share the link within an email and saying, "Hey Ravindra, could you please have a look at this questionnaire? I'm trying to refine my thought process in terms of getting background of the requirement or understanding the wish list of the users all over the globe. And I believe you are one of the most prominent user of the system. So please, could you please go through this questionnaire and give your best possible answers so that I can include in my documentation or the decision analysis and so on and so forth." So too many to interview with the budget and time constraint, you normally go for a survey or questionnaire. Then there are prototyping. This is also called as a proof of concept. Gather the preliminary requirement that you use to build an initial version of a solution. Like we discussed, we might implement couple of biometric system in our St. Louis office of a state farm and try to use it for a couple of weeks so that we will understand how the employee reacts so that attendance, are they able to attend what you can say, are they able to attend the mark the attendance effectively within some the time which are suggested by the client and so on and so forth. So if satisfying your requirement, then you might apply similar experience at other offices as well. If it not, you might try different solution as well. And these are proof of concept normally applicable to either mission critical or a cost critical type of project. Like you are developing a robot or an automated arm for certain specialized work. Now these kind of prototyping, it's quite common in a bigger project, and there are group of analysts we normally work on such prototyping scenario as well. Now prototyping is normally led by analysis as they are trying to validate the requirement. Okay, in mission critical project like US military and all those things, you normally build a prototype. If you know something like Mars Land Rover with those 8 wheels, we are trying to build a vehicle which will basically move around on Mars, and there we have built around 16 17 prototypes. Now it's a mission critical project, right? You can't have a vehicle stuck up with a stone whenever you deploy that vehicle on the Mars. There are no humans to repair it. You might have to scrap the complete investment altogether. Now there you need to come across at least couple of options where you might try these 3 vehicles there, and you have to weight these prototypes against the requirements you have in hands with you. And that's why the mast roller vehicle was a really crucial proof of concept done by NASA before deploying the Mars lander mission. Have anybody have read about this Mars lander mission?
No, sir.
Nobody? Yeah, no problem. So here we are trying to understand who basically requires the proof of concept, right? So wherever we are going for a mission critical or cost critical type of project, we might choose to do POC, proof of concept. Now there are good number of interviews where they have asked what is POC, and that's normally the question is. So POC is proof of concept. Write down somewhere, note down somewhere, wherever interviewer ask about POC is normally regarding the proof of concept. Proof of concept to be implemented or executed in a mission critical or a cross critical type of projects, wherever we have to work through or validate the idea of the conceptual solution, so that whenever we go on a large scale manufacturing, large scale implementation of the solution, we might have a detailed study to implement that solutions with all those background challenges we have faced while implementing this proof of concept. Okay, so this way we keep building our what you can say conceptual model or conceptual clarity within the solution understanding. Okay, now let me tell you about, or let's hear from another mentor where we'll try to understand how this business analysis is normally utilized on the ground. Okay, so let me play a video to you where we'll try to understand how to do a requirement. Yes, ma'am. Any question for me? Hello. Oh, oh. What's happening here? Give me a minute, please. Okay. So yeah. Yes. It's a small video where we'll try to understand how we normally gather requirements, or how normally the requirements gathering process is useful for a business analyst like us. Okay, could you see a person with a cap and a purple or dark blue t-shirt? Hello,
Yes,
could
sir.
you hear? Could you see us,
Yeah.
gentlemen? You can, right? Okay, let's hear from this guy how requirement gathering is a, gradual process and what type of tools do we use. Okay, so let me play this video for you. And I'm playing this. Yes.
Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm the BA tutor, and on this channel I talk about everything in regards to being a business analyst. So if you're interested, please make sure you guys go ahead and subscribe and help me a lot when you support the channel. With that being said, today's topic is going to be how to do requirements gathering. So what is requirements gathering? How do you go about it? What are all the steps involved? I'll be walking you guys through that process right now. So obviously the question is how to do requirements gathering. First of all, what is requirements gathering, right? That's the first question, the first step of this entire process. Well, I've got videos where I go into depth about this, about requirements gathering being the main thing that a business analyst does. You guys can go check out those videos. I also have a course, a beginner business analyst course, that I walk through in detail about this process. So if you're interested in that, the link is in the description to the course. But with that being said, requirements gathering is the essential component of what a business analyst does. Okay, so essentially, requirements gathering and requirements documentation. That is how a business analyst achieves, tries to solve the problem. So again, whatever the problem is going to be for a business analyst, they are going to go ahead and try to elicit the requirements to understand that problem from stakeholders. Okay, so again, I've always drawn this upside down triangle for you guys to remember. So I've got business, so it's short here for plus, the business stakeholders, and I've got the IT developers. You've got the BA that's going to be in the middle, and they are going to go ahead and elicit and gather the requirements from the stakeholders. Okay, so they're going to go ahead and get those requirements from the stakeholders. That is going to be the requirements gathering, and then after they gather those requirements, they're going to go ahead and then translate it into a way that the IT developers are going to be able to code. Okay, because these two entities cannot speak to each other, that is where the business analyst comes into play, and they gather the requirements, and then they elicit, or gather and elicit, and then they translate the requirements. Okay, so that is essentially going to be the first step in terms of understanding what exactly I mean by requirements gathering. Okay, what are requirements gathering, and how exactly do you do that? Okay, so that's really the first step here. And once you understand this, now we can go ahead and move into the next step, which is understanding really the project for yourself. Okay, so as a business analyst, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to be assigned a project. Okay, once you're assigned a project, the first thing to do is understand what the project is about. Okay, you are, as a business analyst, a problem solver. Okay, the project is obviously going to have a problem. They are going to have something there that they are either trying to fix, they are trying to achieve, that they are trying to enhance, that they are trying to, find a way to make it work. So whatever that problem is, you need to understand what that problem is. Okay, and I use the IT world as my main example here because it's that's the field that I'm in as a BA. So if it is a software change with a screen, and the project is talking about changing a screen, changing the components of a screen, that's the problem. Okay, the problem is if they have a screen that is not as enhanced and optimized as they would like to, and they want to add these components, and whatever those components are, those minute details, those are going to be the requirements that is going to be gathered. Now, I will get into that in a second here, but just understand you cannot move forward with this until you understand what exactly the project is going to be about. Okay, so you can't just go and expect to gather the requirements if you don't know. Okay, you need to understand what the problem is. Okay, now hopefully we are all on the same page here and we understand the first step, which is understand the project and what. Hopefully you guys can read this. What is the problem being solved? Okay, so again, whatever it is, it could be anything. You could be updating a document, you could be updating a screen, you could be, changing a back end or front end. It doesn't matter, but you have to figure out what it is. Whatever that problem is that you are solving, understand it. Once you have understood it, and now you know, okay, I know what the problem is, I know what we're trying to solve, I know what we're trying to do. Now it's time to go ahead and set up meetings with stakeholders. Okay? This is the next step. Set up your meetings with the business stakeholders. So once I've understood the problem, I'm ready now to go ahead and move on to gather these requirements. So again, the example I always use, because it's easy to understand, is a screen being updated. Okay, so you've got a screen, a software that the company wants to optimize. The business, I should say, the business stakeholders want to optimize. They've got a bunch of different things they want to do to this page, and they expect you as the business analyst to be able to understand all of the changes, so that the developers can go ahead and then code those changes and update the screen. So, since you have understood that that is the problem, to update the screen, now you set up the meeting with the stakeholders, okay, to do what? To do what I like to call this stuff. Okay, now again, requirements gathering, requirements elicitation, same thing. You're discovering the requirements, okay? All right. I'm talking to my stakeholders now. I'm understanding. Okay, we are trying to change the screen, okay? And I know the reason why we're trying to do it. It's not as optimized. And now the question becomes, how or what are these specific changes, okay? So as the BA, you need to ask the right questions. You need to make sure that no stone is unturned. Ask everything about the requirements, okay? So I'll use the example of the screen. What are all the components being changed, being impacted, okay? And what are the, impacts for these other changes that we're not touching? So if it's a toggle, if it's a button, is it, something that we're doing to optimize, a certain area? Like, you have to make sure that you are covering every single thing. If the business says, basically it's simple, we're going to add 3 buttons on the page, and we're going to go ahead and maybe, remove this portion of it, and we want the screen to be a little shorter the text to change, the color should be this and that. So make sure you obviously ask all the right questions, and all the right questions are going to be making sure that all of the requirements are being captured. Now, again, this is also going to depend on the methodology that you take. So you can have an Agile versus a waterfall. I don't know what I was writing there. Waterfall methodology. Now, again, these are two different methodologies. If you're not aware, check out my other videos. I'll talk about this in my course again. And depending on this, this is really going to help you out, because what you're trying to do here, not just obviously understand all the requirements and every single one, you're trying to lock down the scope. Okay? Because here's the thing. In an Agile format, the scope, making sure that it's locked down, it doesn't have to be, as strict and stringent, because you've got multiple sprints where you can maybe make multiple changes. But in the waterfall methodology, once they said, we're adding 3 buttons, and then they come back to business and says, no, we actually want 4, it's going to be tough to change that. So that's why I'm saying you want to make sure you ask all the right questions so that the business knows that these are the requirements that you've laid out to me, and I'm going ahead and I'm capturing those. You also want to make sure that you are asking the why. Now, again, you understand the project, but you also want to know, okay, you said we're adding 2 buttons here, but can we do 1 and make it more efficient? Do we need 3 here? Like, those are the questions you need to ask, because if they just tell you, it's not going to be enough for you as a BA to just take it and write it down. You have to ask the why. You have to understand, okay, the reasoning for why we need 2 versus 3. Can we reduce it? Can we, go to 1? So ask all those questions. Make sure all of that is covered. And obviously, methodology is going to play a part in doing it. Finally, step number 3 is going to be the obvious step. Is you're going to begin writing the requirements. So, different ways to capture it. Again, depends on methodology. If you go by Agile methodology, you're going to do user stories. If you go by waterfall methodology, you'll do something called a BRD, a business requirements document. These are different ways to capture the requirements. But for the most part, it depends on methodology. But yeah, you can go ahead and you can start writing your requirements once you have done the discovery. Now, when I say set up meetings, these are ask meetings, plural, multiple ones, okay? More than likely, you're not going to get all the requirements in one meeting, or you'll have questions that come up, or you'll have concerns, comments, etc. And so you're probably going to need more than 1 or 2 meetings. And so once you've done all that, then you can go ahead and begin your writing requirements. But again, you don't have to wait to write the requirements until all of this is done. You can start this process and still do this and keep adding to it. Just make sure you understand that by the time you get all of the requirements, the scope doesn't change depending on the methodology that you want, that your project is. Okay? So essentially, that is how you do it, how you do requirements gathering. You go ahead and you understand the project, you understand what is the problem being solved, you set up discovery meetings with the stakeholders, and then you go ahead and you obviously determine the methodology of the project, and then you begin writing the requirements. So hopefully that helps you guys out. If it does, please make sure you give this video a big thumbs up, and please make sure you guys check out my course. Again, link is in the description down below, and make sure you guys check out my other videos.
So here, what we are trying to learn how the different approaches as far as requirement gathering does. Okay, and as he explained, there are normally outputs of what we normally refer as a BRD or SRS or FRS, mentioned as an output or the document created by the business analyst or business analyst team to list down all the requirements with some sort of a high level diagram, conceptual diagram, logical diagram, some use case diagram, some fishbone diagram, SWOT analysis as per the policy and procedure adopted by the organizations where you are working as. And this is a kind of formal statement we need to create to basically jot down all the application's functional requirement. This will be input for design and architecture of the business processes, update, product manufacturing and modification process. So that's how gradually as a business analyst, we do keep working in terms of achieving the solutions for a given project. Does that make sense to you? Anybody have any questions for me at this moment? Anything which you haven't understood?
No, sir, but a quick thing here is so in some projects, there might be only developers who just directly go to the end users and do all this kind of stuff, right?
I couldn't get your question, sir. Could you
So
please?
so this guy who explained, he said that the IT cannot go directly to the business because they don't understand, right? But in some of the projects, I have seen that there are no business analysts in the company, so the IT team directly goes to the end users and they do all this kind of work.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Really great question. Believe me, means this question clearly understand. Make you understand the detailed thought process. You are basically understanding it. Really great. Normally, in today's world, we normally work with Agile Scrum, where we normally talk to client on a daily basis, and this development team talk to client on a daily basis. So why do we need business analyst, or are we using business analyst now? If you look at the project management processes near about a decade earlier, let's say in early 2000 or 1990s and all those things, there the project manager used to do these requirement gathering, and there are lots of running around in terms of business analysis to be done before we kickstart the project. See, it's like chicken and egg, right? Which is the project you're going to target? Which type of project manager do we need? Do we have the skill set required for the such project or not? These type of questions can't be solved on the fly. So before that, you need to have a preliminary study, right? So what project are we going to do? What type of product are we going to develop? What type of services are we going to develop? Do we have the technology, thought process, abreastment of the latest tools and techniques for the current project? Be it something like building, a high rise near seashore. They have its their challenges, like the soil is not firm enough, so you need to really dig deep into the dig very deep into the earth, where you normally keep getting the seawater left and right, and that's why it's difficult to create a high rise near seashore. And I think everybody can understand why and what not of it. Now, as a development partner like Infosys or any builders for that matter, couldn't just start doing it for the sake of trying to do it scenario. He might lose hard-earned money saving on trying to kind of scenario. So rather than what he do, he'll do a preliminary study. Okay, so where can I get, if I need, if I have decided to create that or erect that building, I might hire some expert from the industry. So I should be able to understand what type of tools and technique does it need, what type of skill set or a man force we need. The triple M, basically man, material, machine. So what type of resources do I need? I mean human resources. What type of raw material do I need? Is it available? What type of tools and techniques do I need? Is it available for a given project? So for that, we do a kind of preliminary study, and that's what we normally refer to as a business analysis or requirement gathering technique. Now, as far as Agile Scrum goes, we keep getting requirement on almost daily basis. We keep refactoring those requirements. We keep readjusting the project plan to make sure those requirements are considered for development, because client wants it and client is paying for that. As simple as that, right? And we are in a business of building solutions, building more and more product, services and so on and so forth. So for that, what we do, we normally adopt to a flexibility model, which is Agile Scrum. Now here, even in today's world, we have analysts working with the development team to gather such requirement, to validate such requirement, to basically give a project manager a background of a requirement and a plan to construct it, something like that. So for that matter, nowadays the analysts, which are kind of included in the development team to justify all such flexibilities. Now here, there are good number of developers who normally work as analysts as well, because analyst is basically understanding the business. If you have worked in a similar lines before, you could be a good analyst, because you know the lacunas, shortcomings of these domains, these type of work, and that's why you can behave as an analyst. Only you need to learn how to collect requirement, so how to write in an Excel sheet, how to justify whatever you're written in an Excel sheet with different tools like UML, fishbone diagram, SWOT diagram, decision analysis, and all those things. Now here, what we are trying to do, we are trying to be a flexible organization to keep increasing our business day by day, and that's the actual fact line we are talking about. For all such scenario, in today's current world, we have many developers work as an analyst or do analysis duty on day-to-day basis as well. So why do we need business analysis then? As we just discussed, basically to do a kind of pre-study before assigning the development team, or before trying to understand, do our organizations have enough tools, techniques, or man, material, machine to get that type of work executed. Could we earn some profit, because every business has an aim to earn profit, right? Similarly, here we are trying to understand, could this be a successful profit making endeavor for our organization, and for that we leverage these business analysis techniques. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, sir. Yeah. And one more thing I want to add is like if it's a Scrum-based methodology, we don't have a project manager also, right? We just have only product owner who does all the requirement gathering.
If you're being told like there is no project manager in Agile Scrum, that's a myth. Believe me, project manager is a
Okay.
person who is responsible for getting things done. You can't penalize Scrum Master for things have not executed or not as put up to the mark. Scrum Master is a mentor, is a disciplined person, and we'll learn basically whenever we go to learn these, each of roles and policies and processes of a Scrum Master whenever we do project management. Project manager is a necessary entity like developers. Without developer, you can't construct anything. And for developer, or rather getting developer on board, you might need a project manager or getting team in place. And project manager is a responsible person, a leader of a team, where he or she basically is carrying the responsibility to manage everything if anything fails. Believe me, and that's a big task. This also includes the basic nth level planning of a project planning, or what you can say sprint plan, and so on and so forth. So there are a good number of duties which we're going to learn as a project manager in our next capsule. Okay, so here just trying to understand the duties as per the business analyst. Okay, and you correctly said the Scrum Master is basically kind of a person who chairs the Scrum, the daily Scrum meet, right? But again, we're going to learn a lot about how and what in a step-by-step gradual fashion. I don't want to jump the bandwagon here, because others will also get disturbed. But yes, to answer your question, project manager is a need to every project, be it a very small project or be it a very big project, because he is the guy who is responsible to get the things done. Okay, Scrum Master is a mentor specifically for the adoption to the Agile policies and processes. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you.
And please do keep asking questions. Okay, this way it shows like you are basically learning gradually with everybody else as well. Okay, don't keep confusions to yourself. Let's move on. Let's try to understand one of the most important things we do as an collect minutes of meeting. This has been discussed a good number of times, right? Now you must be fed up with this word called MOM. But this is the one of the most important thing every business the analyst does. Even in a Scrum meet, Agile says we don't have minutes of meeting collected, but at the end of the day, we normally collect as an audio file. So audio file can be act as a minutes of meeting, or there could be some person called scribe who writes down minutes of meeting from that audio file. Okay, there are a good number of scribes in organizations today where they convert these audio audio recording to a minutes of meeting. Or there are some audio automated scribes also with the machine learning capabilities and all those things as of today. So we will discuss about it later, but let's try to understand the importance of minutes of meeting. Minutes of meeting is a universally adopted process. Wherever there is a crucial meet, we take the minutes. And even if you go to a judicial discussions like fighting a case, the scribe takes minutes of meeting at the end of the day, and based on that minutes of meeting, the judge implements his or her decision in terms of according to this law. This is how this person is being penalized, being relieved all of his criminal charges and blah 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 things. That's why minutes of meeting is a really important instrument in our day-to-day life. If you jot down minutes of meeting after some important discussion, it helps you out for quite a longer time. Now, minutes of meeting are official summary of what happened during a meeting. So if somebody asks what is MOM, and these questions have popped more than almost all the interviews. So please keep your answers ready. So what are minutes of meeting? So minutes of meetings are the official summary of what happened, discussed, inferred during a meeting. They serve as an outline, a written record, or a kind of artifact for everyone unable to attend and to use for future reference also. So if an auditor comes to you and tell me, give me MOM, it means that he's referring to this type of records which has to be presented to him or her in collaboration with whatever meeting you're talking about. Minutes document what happened and what decisions are made, what actions are basically put on which shoulders. So who is going to do what? If there are any time limits, we'll mention that as well. So this is kind of minutes of meeting we are talking about. Okay, now let's try to understand how do we write these minutes of meeting, right? So as we discussed, it can be a Word document or an Excel sheet. When written well, when using a good meeting minutes template, meetings are critical communication and a tool for organization. So every corporate North American, Canadian organizations, they do take minutes of meeting. One is basically a kind of minutes of meeting, recorder or a scribe as we normally call it. Second is creating an audio file for all meetings which we take in terms of business analysis or requirement gathering sessions. Okay, now these recordings also archived on a knowledge base, and it's a standard procedure of Wipro, Infosys, Cognizant, Patni, that they normally audio record the minutes of meeting within North America and Canadian regions. Here are some necessary information found in most of the minutes. The title of the group that meeting is, or the meeting itself. So title of the meeting, the date and time, as well as the venue of the meeting room if appropriate. Nowadays we might have a Google Meet or Zoom Meet and we mention it so. We might mention the time zones like what type of EST, CST, PST times. We might mention all the three times as well together. Who is in attendance, who is recording the minutes, the scribe. He is normally owner of the minutes of meeting document. First, there is the minutes of agenda which is mentioned on the top saying, okay, this person, group of person called the meeting for such and such agenda. What decisions are made and by whom. So against that agenda, each and every entity have been discussed. Then who is going to do what, till what time, what type of schedule has been approved or sanctioned, motions and vote count if we have taken that thing, and so on and so forth. Okay, so here there's a defined policy and processes here, but again there are some organizations who do customize such scenario as per their needs, as per their implementation at the ground. So okay, let me play you a small video where we will understand how to basically take down minutes of meeting like a professional. Okay, so let's hear from this good old lady, which is a kind of good author, frankly speaking, and she'll basically guide us how to take minutes of meeting like a professional. Okay, so let's hear her out, and then we'll discuss in detail.
Meeting minutes, it's essential to be able to keep track of your work. It's a great way to remember what's being said in the meetings and
Could you see a lady talking
Yes,
with
sir.
a yeah, and you can hear her well, right?
Yeah.
And what future actions you have ahead of you. Maybe you've just been assigned to write meeting notes on your next big student group presentation or project group meeting, or maybe you just want to be better at writing meeting minutes in general. Well, for both of these cases, this is the video for you. I'm also including some meeting minute examples, so stick to the end of this video to make sure that you actually see those. So I would say that they're basically 4 different steps that you go through when you write meeting notes, which I would say is preparing in advance for the meeting, actually writing the notes, rewriting the notes to make sure that they are readable, and then storing or sharing it or whatever you want to do with them after the meeting. So starting with preparing, you should be prepared in advance to make sure that you can write effective notes. Just a couple of minutes of preparing in advance can make you look so much more professional and make everything go so much smoother. So I would say that the first step is just to write the agenda. Most good and professional meetings have an agenda, and you should probably do the meeting based on that agenda. So you can put it in the meeting notes in advance so that you know the structure for the whole meeting. The next step I would say is to prepare some kind of template or do some kind of preparation for how the meeting notes should look. And I'm going to switch to my computer in order to show you what my more formal meeting notes would look like. Okay, so here you have my more formal meeting minute example. A lot of companies have their own meeting minute template, so check if your company has one, because then it's probably best that you use that one. But if you don't have one, this example is really simple and easy to create. So as you can see, I have meeting minutes in OneNote, which I think is really good. The first thing you should do is to have a title for the meeting minute. This date is really good to use in OneNote because then you can just change the date there and the time, and then you have the date and time ready available. You should have both a title and a date. Then you should also have a list of participants if it's a more formal meeting. If you want to, you can do a list just as I have, so you can check the people. You can do it simply by just having this list and go to the discuss with person checkbox. It's really good to have the agenda written out. If there has been an agenda sent out to the meeting in advance, you can just add that there. And then it's really simple to see all the points that were discussed during the meeting while just skimming over the notes. If there's been a PowerPoint presentation to the meeting, I usually like to add a link to it so that it's simple to find it and goes quickly. Then, of course, you should write out any decisions that were made during the meeting and any notes regarding that decision. If there's something that needs explaining, add that into the decision notes so that you know the rationale behind why the decision was made. And of course, any actions that needs to be done after the meeting, anything that is in regards to what's going to be done in the project, simple things like John Doe is going to send Jane Doe the template for how to do the work. All those small tasks, add them into the actions, write which person is responsible to complete the action and what the deadline is. While you're writing the notes, I would say just use this notes field where you have the headline. I usually do the headlines as the agenda items. That way it's just simpler to follow along. And then after the meeting, it's really good to write some kind of summary about what was said. Just highlight the most important things that were discussed during the meeting. So jumping into how to write more casual meeting notes, I usually just do it like this. I also write the title of the meeting, and then of course the date and the time, and then I have this simple system. I use the built-in functions of OneNote basically to see what actions need to be taken, any decisions made, and any questions for me to look up. And the way that I do it is that I just have the notes. I usually divide it up based on the agenda items as usual, because it's just the simplest way to do it, guys. It's so simple. And then I just write any text, and then as soon as someone comes with an action, I just click Control 1 because that's the shortcut for the to do. And then I'll just write that John, and then some kind of goal date. There you go. Not any more difficult than that. Okay, so the actual writing. I would say that writing digitally is so much better than writing in an analog way because you probably write the meeting in order to be able to share them or store them or something like that. And that is so much easier to do if the meeting notes are digital. In some cases, there's probably better to write on paper, like if you're going to an interview or something, or holding an interview, it might not be so nice to throw up a computer in the face of the other person. But still, I would say we're so used to using our computers, so it's so much better to just take the notes digitally from the beginning. It also saves you a lot of time when rewriting them. When you're actually writing the notes, there are a few things that I believe that you should focus on when writing. And those are, first of all, any facts that come up in the meeting, like the project will be delayed by 2 weeks, or that the client has contacted one of the people in the meeting asking for a status update. Those types of things, facts or things that have happened, those are really good to write down. Then any problems that you're facing, because it's really important to list those and share them so that everyone is aware of them and can help everyone else to solve them. One of the most important things to write down are the decisions that are made in the meeting, especially if the meeting is based on some kind of decision forum like the steering group or some kind of leadership meeting. If you're a project manager, you know that the decisions are basically the most important thing, and having them written down is also really important so that you can share that this is what we agreed on. Because people forget so easily why you took that decision and that the decision actually was made. So yeah, you should also focus on writing down any actions or next steps that you're planning on taking, any actions that come up during the meeting, that the person should send a document, or that person Y is responsible for contacting the client again. All of those things should be written down with a clear deadline in order to make sure that they do them. And then also any questions and answers, because if one person is asking a question, then probably a lot of other people are wondering the same thing. So capturing the question and capturing the answer to that question is also really good to have in the meeting notes. When you're writing the notes in the meeting, you should try to capture as much as you need in order to rewrite the notes and for them to be understandable, but not include all the stuff in between. And this is really hard if you're just starting out, but it gets easier with experience. And if you make sure to focus on those 5 things that I just said, facts, problems, decisions, actions, and questions and answers, the meeting notes will be much more summarized and comprehensive at the same time. The rewriting step is really important, but I think a lot of people skip this, especially if the meeting notes are only for yourself. But the thing here is that when you're writing notes in the meeting, you will be writing quickly, and you might write in spelling errors, and you might write something that is based on how people talk and not how we would write in text, and that's a big difference. At least for me, my sentences are not complete sentences when I've just written in meeting notes. I really need to rewrite them in order for anyone else to understand that. So you need to read through your meeting notes, clarify anything that is unclear, spell check everything. You should always rewrite the meeting notes as soon as you possibly can after the meeting, because then you have everything fresh in your head, and it makes it so much easier to remember what people actually meant with what they said. Also, try to summarize everything as good as you can, because no one is going to read long meeting minutes. They're probably just going to read the basic facts and the summary and some specific things if they're actually looking for something. Also, if someone is going back looking through old meeting notes, they want to be able to skim through it as quickly as possible, and they don't want to skim through heaps of text. So try to make it as short and concise as you possibly can. And then just like you saw in the template, be very, very clear about the decisions that were made and why they were made, and also any next actions, who are responsible for them, and what deadline do they have. Make that super clear so no one can misinterpret that. When you're rewriting the notes, then it's time to share and store them. So you can do this in a couple of different ways. I would say if it's a casual meeting, I would probably just list out the decisions and the actions and maybe a few information points and just stick them in an email and email the people that were at the meeting, and then they get the notes in an email format. If it's a bit more formal, you probably want to have those meeting notes collected somewhere, like in a Teams site or a SharePoint site, so that everyone can read them when they need to have that information. Also, when you store the meeting notes, I would say to try to keep it in a format that is easily searchable. So that is not Word. If you have your meeting notes in a separate document, it will be really hard to search for the content that is in that document. So I usually prefer to write my meeting notes in OneNote because it's easily searchable. Everyone can access the OneNote and add it into their own OneNote. And there's also OneNote available on Teams as a separate page. I hope you learned some new tips and tricks for how to write meeting notes and found the meeting note examples interesting. If you're interested in more work-related tips, make sure to subscribe to my channel and
So here what we're trying to understand, how to have these minutes of meeting taken place in terms of a regular formal minutes of meeting. So what we do normally, we use the template given by the organization which we are working for, or the client might have suggested a minutes of meeting template as well. Okay, and we normally just fill in the blanks there, right? So a kind of to give you a sample minutes of meeting type of notes, here we normally include something like project name, company name, title of meeting, description of meeting, reasons to be called for, the agenda, the author name, the designation and the role, meeting attendees by name, designation and role, points discussed, the action item assigned, action items as action by name, designation, role, target dates, reviewer, and there are something like to be achieved by, reviewed, approvers, and the next meeting in case if a consecutive meeting has been planned on this. So this is a kind of typical minutes of meeting we do in terms of our formal minutes of meeting way. Okay, let me show you a sample of minutes of meeting where we will understand how these minutes of meeting is an important part and how we can use it in terms of typical minutes of meeting. Okay, let me open that minutes of meeting and we'll try to understand. It's a typical Word file which normally used, and
Sir, uh,
yeah, go ahead please.
yeah, sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to know, like, are there any other tools for this instead of OneNote?
There are dime a dozen tools, sir. Means it
Okay.
depends on wherever you start working, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Excel or Microsoft Office. But as
okay,
these lady have suggested, this is not a kind of Word is not searchable item or Excel, so they're starting using OneNote. Mostly I have seen templates like this is a kind of Word item, or the template is available in the Word for the company name and so on, so forth, location, room number, and then action item, dates, and something like that. The other minutes of meeting, let me share with you. This one I just shared with you. Yeah, this is the other minutes of meeting for school PTA minutes, attendance. Could you see this Word file, right?
yeah,
Could you
yes.
able? Let me share these 2 minutes of meeting notes on the WhatsApp, and you can basically have a look at them. These two are totally different. One for the kind of software company. This is for a school PTA meeting type of minutes of meeting. So depending upon this, you can also have some sort of Excel sheet as well in terms of minutes of meeting you want to do. OneNote is a better tool, which is still not understood by many. So it's difficult unless and until your organization is training you on OneNote, and OneNote needs licensing. So you should have so much licenses in terms of the for all your project members and even to the client as well, because you're going to share these minutes of meeting with the client, with the stakeholder, and they are going to approve it. So that's why it's an artifact, right? So sharing and readability is also crucial here. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, sir. Yeah, but nowadays, like, there are some free apps which can translate whatever you're talking into writing, right? So
Yeah. Like I was talking about, the meeting scribe. Even the
Oh,
Zoom
okay.
Meet also has this scribe. The Google Meet also has this scribe. So they collect this thing. But there are lots of challenges there, because you need to then arrange the minutes of meeting in terms of as we just discussed, the template and all, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a bit of work in the background as well.
Yeah, I think maybe the accent also, it need to catch every accent.
That's right.
Mhm.
But right now, we can just record the Zoom Meet, right? We are recording the Zoom Meet on
Yeah,
YouTube. So you can do like that rather than just having the audio file or the minutes of meeting. And then at a later stage, share with your any team member, and he might be able to create minutes of meeting for you. And of course, you can get the scribe from the tool itself. Now even you can convert all those captions for a given video, right, in a given English. So if you are in North America, you can go with North American English. If you're in Europe, you can go with the European English, and so on and so forth. So yes, there are lots of automation happening, but still minutes of meeting is the most important tool where we start gathering requirements. That's why understanding minutes of meeting is a really important thing. Does that make sense to you?
yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you.
Have you understood the importance of minutes of meeting?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So you could be able to answer the question, tell me what you mean by MOM and why we normally record MOM. So these kind of questions normally come in every interview as far as business analyst goes, because this is one of the most prominent tool we use.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, in name of tool, we can use Word, Node, Excel, whatever the company have been, zero down on or written in their quality policies. And so what we use is immaterial, but why we use is the most important thing here. Okay, and what all data you collected with this tool, that's the important thing to be understood. Okay. Oh wow, we are almost at the end of the session. So let's do one thing. Let's revise on these minutes of meeting in our next session again, and we'll try to understand how basically we can have some hands-on experience on minutes of meeting. And most probably in the next session we'll share some hands-on experience of how to collect minutes of meeting. And then we might share some homework to basically for us to create some minutes of meeting, so that you'll understand minutes of meeting in depth up to its last element. Okay. Chalo then. Let's stop here, unless anybody have any question for me at this moment.
No, sir.
Okay, so please do join our next session, and will be important, and we'll learn more about minutes of meeting and the other tools. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot for your time. Have a good
Yeah.
night.
Yeah.
Bye
Thank you.
bye.